Hello you guys, and welcome to Abundantly Minimal. My name is Sarah, and thank you so much for checking out that montage with photos and video footage from our trip to both Venice, Italy, as well as in Munich, Germany. So as always, with this travel recap, I will share all of the experiences and activities that we did, as well as some of my general travel tips, and of course some food suggestions, especially if you are also a vegan. So that being said, we'll start out with Venice, Italy. Now Jake and I had already visited Venice before as part of our belated honeymoon that we did back in 2015, but when I had first visited, I knew my family would love it, and at that time obviously I didn't know that this trip was going to happen, so the fact that we were able to include it as a destination was really exciting to me. We were in Venice for 3 days. To get to Venice from Salzburg, we did take a train, which I was excited. Most of the cases we probably could have taken trains, but it wasn't the most time-effective option, as time was kind of the limiting factor. So we did take the train from Salzburg with a stop in Innsbruck for a couple hours, and then finished our way to get to Venice. So we really enjoyed stopping in Innsbruck. It was about 3 hours there, so we were able to explore a little bit as well as get some lunch there. And yeah, very peaceful. I hadn't really been much of a fan of like hard rock cafes. I know they're in a lot of the cities, but the funny thing was, I noticed when I was looking at restaurants is that the one in Innsbruck actually had way more vegan options than normal. They had like vegan mac and cheese, vegan nachos, vegan burger, like lots of things. So we did end up going there, and afterwards we ended up hopping back on the train to go to Venice. Once we had arrived in Venice, we checked into our Airbnb. This was a gorgeous Airbnb. Again, plenty of rooms for the whole family. I really loved there was a little courtyard out in front, which I think filmed my Iceland recap video in. So it was a lovely space and very relaxing to come back to, and also air conditioned, which I appreciated. Back when Jake and I visited the first time, it was during like a record high temperature for like 13 years. It was the hottest it had ever been, and there was no air conditioning, so we were literally like dripping even when we were in our Airbnb. All right guys, I had to temporarily move inside. Seems like there were just too many noises outside, even though much more pleasant outside, and I like the lighting there better. It is what it is. So after we checked into our Airbnb, we decided to do some exploring. It was in the evening, but it was still so beautiful walking around, fairly quiet, and we really enjoyed ourselves. And we also went to San Marco Square to take a look at it. It's definitely one of the most touristy parts of Venice, so it's usually recommended to go at like off-peak times, so either earlier in the day or later in the day where there will be fewer people around, and also not to eat in there because the prices are more expensive. Checked that out, and then we were looking for dinner places. Now, like, the blessing and the curse of Italy is that, first of all, the food's really good. Most places, I think, at least, you know, by American standards, pretty much all the restaurants were better than what they would have been like an Italian restaurant in the US. However, there's still a big range, and it can almost feel a little overwhelming trying to choose like the best place. Most places have, you know, menus out front, but then some have people who are trying to lure you in, and that's like a red flag. But it can feel a little overwhelming trying to make the best choice. But we did go to a really exceptional place for dinner. I believe it was called Taverna, like bar and restaurant, I think. But they had really great pasta. Jake had pizza. It was phenomenal. That was a great start to it. We went back to the Airbnb. The next day, our main activity altogether was going to a free walking tour. Now, as I've mentioned before in these videos, I love free walking tours because they give you such a great overview of a lot of parts of the city, specifically this one in Venice. I was really interested to learn about the different architecture, like specifically how Venice was built, as well as be able to notice different architectural styles and methods that were used in a lot of the buildings there, because Venice is such a unique example. So that was really positive. And I also just think the walking tours are so nice because you can often, you know, it's not as risky when you're booking. You don't have to pay a large expense to be able to do them. Some of them you just even show up, and with your tip at the end you can decide essentially how much the tour was worth. So it's a really nice model, and as you'll continue to hear, we did a lot of these tours during our time. And then after the tour, Jake and I did split up from the group. My family went back to actually the same restaurant from before since it was so good, and did some of their own exploring. And then Jake and I, we wanted to try this place that sold crepes called Cocoetta. I think. And with this, you know, it's very interesting, at least at the time we were traveling, it's one of the top rated places on TripAdvisor, and I was curious. I heard they had a lot of vegan options as well, and it sounded like, you know, this business was just full of heart, like it's this one guy running it all by himself. And honestly, the crepes were outstanding. And even though we ate so much good food in Italy, literally the best thing we ate were these crepes. So if you find yourself going there, definitely make the trip out there. Check the hours on Google before you go, because what I noticed, because we thought about going back the next day, what I noticed is that he updated his hours like daily or very regularly. So I look and the hours would be one thing, and then I'd look later and they had changed. So I think that was what he was basically going off of. But the food was outstanding. We each both got a savory crepe. I would have probably gotten a sweet crepe too had I known how good they were. But again, like, he's the guy who owns it, he's the only one doing everything. And so you definitely, it's a slower process, you're more patient while you're waiting there. There's often a line going out the door because they're so delicious. So anyway, we got those. We just sat on some nice little steps on a bridge in Venice and ate them there. And timing wise, it was getting close to sunset, and we were close to a spot that had gorgeous views of the sunset. So I think we ended up sitting there for about 30 to 45 minutes, and we watched the sunset. It was just so relaxing and peaceful. So that was phenomenal. And then we started moseying our way back. We wanted to get a more substantial dinner, so we were kind of figuring out some potential places to go, kind of getting our way back, just because it is very easy to get lost in Venice. But the craziest thing happened while we were kind of off to the side of a darker street. I don't want to say alley, but it was more narrow, dark, not sketchy though. I guess I'm describing it in maybe a sketchy way. The sun had set though, so it was kind of dark. And we're looking at my phone trying to figure out like where we want to go. We're a little lost from where we should be. And then a girl approaches us and she's like, "Are you Sarah from Abundantly Minimal?" And I lost it. Like, that was just, it was such a crazy moment. So I had the pleasure of meeting Eleonora, who does live in Venice, and one of the sweetest people. Eleonora, if you're watching this, hi. It was such a pleasure to be able to meet you. And Jake was kind of laughing because I was sort of fangirling over a fan, but it was such a crazy experience. Just, you know, the odds. She was coming home from work and we were just randomly lost, stopped there. So the fact that we were able to meet is just amazing. And we had a lovely conversation for I don't know how long, maybe 15 minutes, half hour. It was so lovely. And I feel like my smile muscles were hurting, but it was just such an amazing thing. Even though I know we are not that giant of a channel here, and we're all spread out in a lot of places. If you ever think you see me, please say hi. It was just such a neat experience, and so one of my best memories from the whole trip, and it was lovely. So definitely a highlight. And that's the thing, I mean, that night was kind of random. You know, we didn't plan watching the sunset. We didn't know we were gonna go eat these amazing crepes. And then of course, you know, we were in the right place at the right time to be able to meet Eleonora. So it was just such a cool thing. We ended up finding a pizza place that we had eaten at from our first trip that was close to the Airbnb, since at that point it was getting kind of late. It was around 10 o'clock and a lot of the places were starting to close down. So that was that day. Our next day, then we took a day trip to Florence, just because I had really enjoyed my time in Florence and thought that my family would also enjoy it. Now, we were there just for one day, so we didn't do a lot of the, you know, major sites. To be honest, Jake and myself, as well as my family, are not really that into art. At least like, you know, art museums and that sort of thing. It's just not really an interest. So we didn't end up doing a lot of that kind of stuff, even though it's well known for their art. We ended up doing two major attractions. We went to the Duomo, which is definitely a must-see. There's a lot that you can do with the Duomo, such as going up to like the bell tower or climbing up and going around the roof, which Jake and I did do last time, but this was actually my first time going inside the Duomo. It is free to get in. You want to have shoulders covered if you're going there. So it was very beautiful inside, a little more simple than one would expect, but still lovely. And then after we went to the Duomo, then we went to the Pitti Palace. Now, when Jake and I were there, we actually hadn't gone inside, but our Airbnb was right by there, and we sat out on the front step area like in the evenings, just some kind of like watching the world go by. It was very pleasant. So we ended up going there, and we actually went inside, and it was lovely inside, very beautiful. I could not believe just how ornate and detailed everything was. There were all of these fancy paintings basically covering the walls in every room that was available. We got to see the throne room as well as some furniture, and that's just what I love, like with history, kind of just thinking about we're standing in the same spots that, you know, were used for very significant people over the course of history, whether they were, you know, really good, really bad. It's very powerful for me, and that's one of the biggest reasons why I love history and learn about it, just to think that, like, you know, these people were in the same spots we are now, and just being in that space is so fascinating to me. But anyway, we went there, lovely, a little overwhelming, but beautiful. We also had a really yummy meal at a place that right now I'm not remembering. I will put it on the bottom of the screen here after I go look it up, but it was very good. And then we also got gelato at a favorite place from where I'd gone before. I mean, I just got sorbet this time compared to, you know, like gelato with dairy in it, but it was very delicious, and it was just a really nice time. I will say, compared to before, it does seem like Florence has grown in popularity among tourists, and it was a little overwhelming at parts, so we're definitely very happy we didn't stay in Florence. Not that it's not a beautiful city, but just because the crowds were insane, and we hadn't experienced crowds like that anywhere else on our travel as we did that one day. So that was kind of interesting and unexpected. So the tourist industry is alive and well in Florence. But it was a good day overall. We also, while we were there, Jake and I were very excited to have a lot of vegan croissants. I had heard about them and was very excited because croissants are something that typically not vegan, butter and other products. But we found one in the train station in Venice, very clearly labeled, easy to find. So we got one, and that was pretty good. And then we also went to a place that we popped into. They had several filled croissants, which was exciting. I think I made the lady laugh there because I said we'd take 2 of the vegan croissants, and she asked which flavors. I was like, 1 of each, actually. There were 3 flavors. So one with chocolate, apricot, and cherry. They were phenomenal. Definitely had a lot of pastries that day. So we took the train back to Venice, and then our last day was much more laid back, still a little bit of walking around. We got another meal at just like a random place that was close by, and then we ended up going to the airport where my family and Jake and I went our separate ways. Italy was the last part of the 2-week trip where we were traveling with my parents and sister, and we had such a lovely time overall. Like, I think it went really, really well. I think everyone had a great time, so it was definitely just a phenomenal experience, so many great memories. My family then flew to London where they concluded their trip, and then Jake and I moved on to the next stage of our journey, which was going to Munich, Germany. Someone might wonder, well, weren't you already in Germany? Why would you go back to Germany now? So here's the thing. The original plan was not to go back to Germany, it was to go to Greece. We were going to go to Athens, followed by Santorini. But after, you know, you have the brainstorming phase of the trip, and then when it's time to actually see how the dates match up and book airline tickets, train tickets, etc., I was stunned to find out that the day that we were going to travel, the prices were a lot higher from Venice to Athens than I expected. I think it was around $150 per ticket, which by US standards, that's still fairly cheap, but for what I had seen earlier, it was a lot more expensive. And so I thought, that's kind of weird. And I was looking at other options. Now, one of my favorite buildings in the world for as long as I can remember is the Neuschwanstein Castle in Bavaria, Germany. And when I was planning earlier, it was something that really no one else in my family had any interest of seeing. So when I brought it up, I just kind of let it go because, again, it wasn't a big interest. So I was still kind of like holding out hope that I was going to see it, but the timing just didn't work out in the first part of our trip. But maybe it was meant to be when I plugged in from Venice to Munich, which is fairly close to where the castle is, a couple hours away by public transit. I was stunned to find out that the airfare was very cheap. It was around $40 per ticket, which, especially by US standards, is a bargain. So we decided to go through that option. Again, it could have been something we took a train, like an all-day train, but our limiting factor was somewhat time as well. So we booked the flight and we were in Munich for 3 nights. Now, I guess I'm saying in Munich, but we actually were at a hotel one night in Munich, and then we left that hotel to go actually much closer to the castle. So we actually would be able to, at least in theory, have time to explore the castle area the night before, as well as then have a full day visit, be there right in the morning, not have to rely on a tour bus to take us there. So we did that, and that worked out very well. And then after that, we went back to Munich and we flew out of Munich the next day. So we didn't really spend a ton of time in Munich, but it was centered around visiting the castle, which is what I cared about the most. So when we arrived in Munich, we first went to our hotel, which was something that I was looking that was more affordable, and they were actually giving us a free upgrade on the room, which was really cool and unexpected. After we were there, we went to go get some dinner at a restaurant called Max Pet, and it was outstanding. I don't know what it is, but a lot of the places we were going in Germany were some of the best I've ever been to. So dinner was phenomenal there. So that was definitely a really delicious meal. All vegan, of course. And then the next day, since we were in Munich for a lot of the morning as well as some of the afternoon, we did another free walking tour, and unfortunately that day was pretty gloomy. The tour was lovely. We had a good idea of, you know, different parts of the city. We got these yummy Buddha bowl type dishes with some curry and lots of veggies for lunch. That was nice, simple, healthy. And that was kind of a later lunch, and then we ended up taking the train to the town of Füssen, which is very, very close to where Neuschwanstein Castle is located. So we ended up going there, very pleasant train ride, but by the time we got there, it was downpouring. It was some of the heaviest rain we encountered during our trip. We had originally planned to go kind of hiking in the area around Neuschwanstein Castle that night, but just because of the downpour, we had a really low-key night. We checked into this tiny little, I guess, Airbnb hotel. It was listed in both places, just family-run place, and it was very simple, but the outstanding part about it was that our room looked out directly at Neuschwanstein Castle, as well as the other main castle in the area. Hello, you guys, and welcome to Füssen, Germany, or I guess technically we're in Schwangu. I'm really, really excited because we are here to see the Neuschwanstein Castle, which has been a building I've been kind of obsessed with for a long time, and probably would say it's one of my favorite buildings, even though I've never actually seen it in person, but just from pictures. And we are here. I want to show you something amazing. The view here is something that is so amazing. I'm going to zoom in a bit. It's a super rainy and gloomy day. But from the balcony, which also happens to be covered, you can see the castle there in the distance. Again, it's really cloudy. That was pretty remarkable, the fact we were able to see it, at least for a while. Eventually it got too cloudy and rainy, we were not able to see it anymore. But what we ended up doing were just getting grocery store products, basic things like hummus, crackers, some basic fruits, and we had like a little porch picnic. The porch was covered, so even as it was downpouring, we had a really relaxing meal and conversation while we were there. And you know, that's the thing where, you know, we feel like we're pretty simple. We got some beautiful scenery, and that was very pleasant for us. So we went to bed, and the funny thing is that I was nerding out so much about this castle that while I was sleeping, you know, I woke up several times, which normally doesn't happen. Normally I sleep much more soundly, but each time I'd get up and go take a look at the castle. I noticed that it kept clearing up a little bit more at night. So when we went to bed originally, the castle was gone. Like, it was either too cloudy, foggy, rainy that we couldn't see it anymore. But I started seeing it clear each time. So I think around like 2 a.m. when I woke up, I looked at it and it was starting to become more clear. So got my camera out, took a couple pictures on the porch, went back inside. Then I woke up again around like 4:30 a.m. Still dark, still illuminated, but it was perfect. All the clouds were gone. And so I took more pictures at that time. And yeah, it was just so magical. And then it had cleared up a lot for the next day. It was still very humid, cloudy still. We had pre-booked tickets ahead of time, but you still have to check in and pick up the physical tickets at the ticket center. But definitely recommend that, because it was an attraction where, you know, we were there much earlier, but they were already selling out of a lot of the different times. So there were some people who, if they got to the ticket center without tickets, you know, around 11 or noon, they might not get to go to actually go inside the castle until much later, like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. So definitely recommend getting tickets ahead of time. And that was for tickets to go inside. Now, since I've kind of idolized this building and been obsessed with it as long as I can remember, I definitely wanted to go inside. And even though you're not allowed to take pictures inside, the castle was stunning. It was probably my favorite castle that I've ever been inside. Of course, it's not that old. It was built in the 1870s. Afterwards, walked more around the outside, and they have like a suspension bridge that you can walk on, and that's where you get the iconic view that you've probably seen of the castle if you Google it, from that bridge. So that was mind-blowing. There were a lot of people on the bridge, but when I got there, it was just kind of like one of those magic moments, like, wow. That's it. That's the view I've been looking at from pictures for all these years, and then now I'm actually here in real life. Of course, gorgeous nature everywhere around the castle too. So it was such an incredible experience, and I'm so happy I was able to do it. Later that afternoon, we took a train from Fusen back to Munich. While we were in Munich, we went to another dinner place, Bodhi, I think. Again, I don't know pronunciations exactly, I can't confirm that, but very good food. I had like a German type specialty of Spätzle. Again, pronunciation might not be correct there, but it's essentially, from what I've heard others describe it as, it's kind of like, you know, the mac and cheese of Germany, and it was phenomenal. It was vegan, of course, but very outstanding. I think it had some like little crispy, maybe like sweet potato strips or onion strips on the top, but wow, it was so good. So that was definitely a very delicious meal. We explored a little bit more that night, but then that kind of wrapped up our time in Munich. Now, I would say if you are someone who wants to go see the castle, but maybe is not as obsessed about it, you probably could do like a day tour. I've been on several of those day tours, and they definitely have a time and a place. My general thoughts about those bus tours or day tours is that, well, they can be a really great and convenient way to see a lot of different sites. The time is often really short that you get, and usually I have to leave the site before I actually want to. So I didn't want to have that experience here at the castle. So definitely it would be more convenient had we just done a tour, but I wanted to spend more time there and didn't want to feel rushed. So I recommended, you know, for at least for me, it worked really well to do it kind of how we did. So that is my, albeit long-winded, summary about our travel in Venice as well as in Munich, Germany. If you guys want to check out any of our past travel videos, you can do so over here. And if you have not yet subscribed to the channel, you can do that up here. Our next travel video is going to be to Greece. We'll see you guys next time. Bye.